Okay. Ron. And I guess I should have thought about this beforehand, like what the date is today.
Oh, today I think is the 4th.
Today is the 4th.
Yeah.
So on the 4th of August, September
Yeah.
of 1976, I thought that it would be nice to have a tape, you know, as I talked about before, where we can just talk and chat. And you know, it's interesting that there are things that we've never really had a chance to talk much about that I'm really kind of interested in, and I thought it also would be good to have them for a long time. And I'd be interested in just hearing what you have to say about your childhood, when you came to this country, and you know, when you got into business and the whole, you know, sort of a biography, you know. The tape runs a long time. So.
It does?
Yeah. So we have a long time to sort of relax and...
So, and you would like me to start of the time when I would say I just about remember my childhood.
Yeah, that's a good place to start, is right.
Well, the first time thing that I can remember about my childhood is going to kindergarten.
And where was it?
And that was in the town I was born in, Focșani, Romania. And that should have been around the year 1907. I must have been about 4 years old. And I remember being taken to the kindergarten and entered there. The name of the teacher was Ofristik.
Is that a German name?
Yeah, it was a German name. He was a Jew from Germany. And he used to run this kindergarten in a private home. It was his private home. He had a big orchard around the house, and I remember during the time we went to school, at certain times he would take us into the orchard to pick fruit, and he'd give us all the fruit that he picked from the orchard.
Yeah.
He had a big stick so he could reach some of the fruit and knock it down. And in between we learned a little bit to read and write.
In kindergarten?
In kindergarten. We had the ABC books, you know, taught us the ABC and all that. I even sort of remember a little the different animals and figures that were in the book that were very fascinating to me to see. That seems to me they were in color even.
Did you enjoy it?
And I enjoyed it very much. And what I enjoyed even more is that every day we went to school, Father used to give me a nickel to buy a pretzel, one of those. It was sort of like those soft pretzels they sell today, only they were round and made with sesame seeds. And that was the most delicious thing you could ever have.
It was a big treat.
Yeah, it was a real treat. It was, and that's about all I remember about the kindergarten. Next to that, I remembered I graduated from kindergarten to grammar school.
What was, well, when you were in kindergarten, since you remember back that age, what, your mother was still alive then? Right?
Oh, yes.
When did
mother.
she die? How old were you when she died?
I was about 12 and a half years old when Mother died.
And
What was your family then? How many people were in your family?
We were we were 8 altogether, 6 children. And
When you were 4?
Pardon?
When you were 4, there were 6. There were 8 of you.
No. When I was 4, when I was 4, it was just about the time. Yeah, we were only 5 then because the twin was born when I was 4.
I see.
Alfred and Tony were born when I was 4. So it must have been at the end of my age of 4 that I started kindergarten. I would say that because I was born in February and he was born in April 4 years later. So it must have been after they were born. And of course we had a tragedy in our house, a very great tragedy that time. Also around the year that the twins were born, it was about the same year that my sister died at the age of 18, my oldest sister. 18 years old, yes. She was a very fine girl. Everybody loved her. The city was, the whole city mourned her death.
What was her name?
Sally.
She was 18.
18 years old, yes. She was quite a young lady.
So yeah. She was 18 and you were the next oldest? Or?
No. Between me there was Chile and Lucia.
Right.
Then I came. Chile was about 7 years older than I was, or older than maybe 8 years. And Lucia was about 5 years older. Then I came 5 years later.
Yeah. And then
so, yeah, that was the time of the tragedy was when the twins were about the same year that the twins were born. I don't even remember today what her sickness really was. I don't think they knew it themselves. All I remember is they fumigated the house. So it might have been contagious disease. Yeah, that she died of.
How was, except for those things, tragedy like that? What do you remember of your feelings about being 4? Were you happy? I mean, was there a lot of fun?
Oh yes, we were. I was very happy. Of course, I was happy for more than one reason. I was sort of spoiled. For one thing, I was the youngest that time, and I was also the first boy born in the family, and that was a great event to be the boy, because the families in those days were very partial to boys. And since I was the first boy,
you were the first one.
Yeah, I was spoiled. Everybody used to cater to me more or less. And then besides this, when they sent me, when I went to school, that was only about a year later. I started school young too. I started school at 5. And over there, we graduate grammar school when we are supposed to be 10, but I graduated when I was 9. And in school, I also had it very nice. I enjoyed my going to school very much.
You're a good student?
Yeah. I was a good student because I had a very receptive mind, and I didn't have to work hard. I didn't have to do much homework. I hated homework. Oh, I hated homework.
What happened to, what was it like around your house when you didn't do your homework? Was your father tough?
No, somehow or other I seemed to be able to get by without having bad marks, or real bad marks. So I didn't suffer too much from it. But my school friends used to tell me, geez, if I would have a receptive mind like yours, I sure would go places, because it wouldn't take me any time at all to learn anything, and I used to have to study. But I just didn't care for it. It used to bore me to have to sit down and study.
Well, what kind of kid do you think you were when you were, say, 10? I mean, like, if we talked about, you'd certainly be able to describe the kind of kid I was at the age of 10, or Stephen, or is now. Rachel, what kind of kid do you think you were?
I wasn't average, very average. In other words, I used to go to school and come home, go out to play. As a matter of fact, my father and mother, they used to like me to go to play. They'd sometimes let me go over to visit a boyfriend to play with him. One time, for my birthday, I must have been about 7 years old or so, they gave me a beautiful little pocket watch, and they engraved my name on the back and all that. They showed me what time I should be home and all that on the watch. And I came home on time, but without a watch. I don't know whatever happened to the watch. I must have lost the watch or something. And but otherwise, everything went along like a normal grammar school child's life.
Would you say you were a good kid?
Oh yes, I was very, very good. I didn't get in trouble or anything like that. Up to the time I went to what they call a high school over there. When I was 10 and I graduated grammar school, I went into that high school, and over there I started to become a little more active. I used to like jumping, and we used to, after school, I had a few friends, and we'd wind up in having a game. I think here they jump, but whether one kid jumps over the other kid, one kid bends down.
Leapfrog kind of.
Yeah, leapfrog, yes. And we used to have all kinds of marks and whatnot. Sometimes we'd leapfrog with only one finger on the kid's back, and one time with fists on the kid's back and all that. We had, the kid that would perform the best would be the leader, and the others would have to follow that same design, the same style. And I was the leader quite a good many times. In sprinting, I was very good.
Pretty good, huh?
Yeah, I was very good in sprinting. And then, in order to choose the leader, why we had to jump a distance, the distance first, and whoever would jump the furthest distance would get to be the leader. Well, they would take the marks from where your heels would fall. Well, I found out that if I would jump and I just throw my feet ahead of me,
yeah,
why then I could jump very far, and my heels would really show quite a good distance. Yeah. And I became the leader very often. But then if you didn't perform once right, well, then the next one would become a leader. Anyway, that was our favorite game, and that used to make me late home. And Mother used to sort of, she used to kind of fight for me. She'd put up for me because Dad didn't like the idea of me coming home late. And she used to come around and call me home, say, "Come on, it's late," and Father is getting kind of sore about it. And I'd get home just in time so that he wouldn't be too sore. And
what were your sisters and brothers like? Were they hellraisers, or was everybody pretty much everybody has a different personality, right? I mean, some of them.
Yeah, well, the thing that I couldn't say too much is because my sisters were the older ones.
Right.
And naturally, they were like girls, and sometimes, if it paid for them, they'd even confide in me certain things.
Right.
And if it was anything that they didn't want me to know, they'd manage somehow or other to keep me away from it, keep me out of it.
Yeah.
But all in all, but they were nice girls, though. Very,
Yeah.
very, very fine girls.
Well
That's
behaved.
well behaved. That's one of the things about our way of life, even today. One of the things that I think keeps us so close to home and keeps us so close to one another is that there is a tie between us of a certain dignity that persisted in our house.
What do you mean
That,
dignity?
well, everybody used to feel that you belong to a certain home that you were proud to belong to.
Yeah.
And that caused a certain dignity. And today we still sort of feel that, even though we don't realize it maybe sometimes, but you can see how close we are to one another even today. And it seems to me that that had a lot to do with it. Even when we speak about our home, not our family,
Right.
we feel that even the home had a certain dignity. That
What kind of home was it?
it was, by standards, by our standards here in this country, it was a small home. By the standards of Romania, it was a big home because we had a cellar, a big cellar, and we had the first floor, and which in front of the first floor was the store, the jewelry store.
Right.
And we had an upstairs, and the upstairs were the bedrooms for the children.
Yeah.
And that was considered a good-sized home. Well, just to give you an idea of how big a home it was, that when the Nazis came,
Which was when?
and that was around 1939 or 40, during the Second World War.
Right.
The family that they were married by that time, their children, and pretty near everybody of the family came and took refuge in that house.
Is that right?
At times they had as many as 24 people at a table for months or maybe even years at a time, you can say, pretty near during all the time that the Nazis were there. As a matter of, well, they didn't all sleep at home, but they used to come there. They used to gather there for dinner.
Well, that's getting
Anyway.
all the way to 1939, but
Yeah, that's
why
pretty
is it
late.
that, why, I mean, I'm really ignorant in this area, so you had to fill me in. Why is it that, I mean, were they not rounding up Jews at that time, or what were they doing in Romania?
Romania was fortunate in a way that Antonescu,
He was
he was the premier of Romania, and Antonescu sided with the Germans. He allied with the Germans,
right.
and by becoming allies, the Germans gave Antonescu the freedom of running the country the way he wanted.
Oh,
The reason why they were refugees was because they lived in Ploiești, where the oil fields were, and the oil fields were bombed. They were afraid they were bombed by the Americans, and they were afraid they might be bombed again.
I see.
So they took refuge over there. The only one that was bothered some by the Nazis was my brother-in-law, who was from Russian-occupied territory, Bessarabia.
Yeah.
And he had a little trouble because the Russians claimed them as their citizens and the Romanians claimed them as their citizens. So he had a little trouble. Somehow or other he got out of it.
Well, back in again to to your youth in Fokshan, if there were at a certain point there, I guess, there was a lot of kids, huh? You're talking there about just six
Yeah, we were finally 6 children
children. And
when my youngest brother came.
what were your parents like? I mean, were they around to, you know, you know, to, you know, you and I used to go to movies and we used to do things together. Were they around to do things, and, you know, or was your father working all the time?
No, over there it's all work, and
All work.
all work for the, it was all work for the older folks, for the parents. The only time of rest was the Sabbath, and that was devoted to the father would go to the synagogue, and mother, when I was little, she would take the Bible to read the Bible in Ivrit.
Right.
They would read the Bible and all that, and they would rest. No work was done at all. There wasn't even a fire made.
Not on Saturday.
Not on Saturday. Even during the cold days, they would make the fire on the day before and make the stove real hot. The clay stoves, the
Right.
big clay stoves, real hot. They were made out of terracotta, yeah. And they were kept hot and then put as much wood in it as possible so that it stayed hot the next day too.
When did you come to the conclusion that you were an atheist?
I never did really come to, I wouldn't say that I was an atheist, no. No, I would say that I was more agnostic than an atheist.
Okay, when did you come to the conclusion you were an agnostic?
I came to the conclusion when I was about 16 years old. About 15 or 16 years old,
And-
something like that. I went to Bucharest. That must have been during the war. I went to Bucharest to get a job, and I went to attend the union meeting there. And the union meeting, they were in the union meeting in those days. There were no unions; they were socialists. And I didn't even join the socialists or the party or anything, but it was before the 1st of May, and they were supposed to, the 1st of May, they were supposed to parade
Right.
first. And they asked everybody who was there to parade, to show up for the parade. Well, as a young fellow, I was afraid not to show up. Not only that I was afraid, but I felt I gave my word to go. So I went to show up to the parade, to the
May Day.
May Day parade, and we paraded. I think we even paraded in front of the King's Palace, if I remember right. But I wouldn't be surprised they took pictures of everybody that time. But that was as far as my socialism went when I was in Europe. As a matter of fact, it put me in bad standing with my boss, because he found out he happened to be away at the time, and I was supposed to manage the store when I was 15, 16 years old. And he found out that his manager was parading instead of being in the store.
What kind of store was it?
It was a small jewelry store, but very active, in a very active place, and did a lot of business. And I shouldn't have done it, but I guess I didn't. I wasn't old enough to realize the responsibility and all that. So
When you
just when,
well now, okay, but now there is still the subject which fascinates me of your deciding that you were an agnostic when you were 16. Did you tell your father about that?
No, I never told Father that I was an agnostic. I don't think that subject ever came up. But Father, it wasn't a question of being an agnostic. I was a Jew, and I was a believer in God,
Right.
naturally. And strange as it seems, I could follow Judaism, but I never did like going to a temple
Never
or
did.
anything like that. No, it may be because I went to the temple for a whole year when I was 12 and a half years old to say Kaddish.
Yeah.
And I went twice a day, morning and evening. And for a kid 12 and a half or 13 years old, I don't think that I could understand that it's a good thing for me to do. Or, although sometimes even going to the temple, there were other boys too that had to go to temple too, and during periods of intermission or whatever you may call them, we would play and chew the fat and all that. So, but it kind of it kind of displeasured me as far as the temple is concerned. I couldn't warm up to it too much.
What was it that your mother died of?
Well, we were the only ones who contracted typhoid fever in the city. It was a big city by standard, sure. It must have been, I think it must have been about 25,000 people. And out of 25,000 people, 5 in our family contracted typhoid fever. And it was a very sad situation. There was no hospital there. The Jewish hospital didn't have any money to operate. The city didn't have any money for anybody. So they opened it especially for our purpose. So my older sister and my younger brother and I went to the hospital there.
Right.
And father and mother stayed home, and it was marvelous. You never realize how nice people are and all that until you really have a need for people to be nice to you. You think sometimes you might think that some people will talk about you, they're not your friends, and even your friends sometimes may talk to you behind your back and all that, but when you need them, they're there.
So who was
That's
sick?
the father, mother, my sister Lucia, the second oldest that remained that time, me next, and my brother Alfred.
You all had typhoid.
We all had typhoid. And when it was a period, I don't remember what it was, 6 weeks or 8 weeks that we had to be in the hospital. We were living on yogurt only. That's the only thing we could eat, yogurt, nothing else.
Wow.
And one day they came over and they said that the doctor said I was well enough that I could go home of the 3 of us. So I said, okay.
After how long?
After, I'd say about 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
You must have been really sick.
Oh, yes,
Were you
yes.
afraid you were going to die?
Well, not that. No, we didn't know. We just thought we were sick, that's
Yeah.
all. No, we didn't. The funny part of it is that the sickness is not so that you suffer a lot of pain or anything like that. You don't realize it or anything like this. I guess you're on a fever or something. And as a
Yeah.
child, you don't realize what's what.
But you were 12 and a half.
Yeah, I was 12 and a half, and they came around. They said I'm well enough to go home. I came home, and I saw the mirrors were covered. So when I saw the mirrors covered, I remember somehow or other that the mirrors were covered in other places where I went, and somebody had died in the house, and there was my sister, my oldest sister, and my father there, and my mother was there, and it was very tragic.
Oh, wow.
I realized immediately.
You had no idea till then.
No. And the reason why they called me is because they had to have somebody say Kaddish. So,
Was your father still sick then?
He was, no, he was convalescing. We were all convalescing at that time already. I guess that's what, yeah, it was.
So
yeah.
all the time you were in the hospital and your mother and father were sick, then you didn't have anybody come to see you?
No, we weren't allowed to have anybody come to see us. The doctor, and then there was a woman who took care of us. She was no nurse, the trained nurse. She was a practical nurse. But I guess she was pretty good. She sort of knew that she's going to get something for putting in the right work.
So all that was, for that 6 weeks, you were just there. Were you in a private room there, or were you with Alfred?
No, they don't have private rooms there. They had a, what do you call
Ward?
a ward.
Yeah.
But we were the only three there because
Yeah.
the hospital has been closed up to that time. They opened it, so we were the only three. And naturally, they wouldn't allow anybody else after that, after we got in there. However, when we started convalescing, they let in somebody else. That was towards the end.
So you came
Yeah.
in, you came home, and your mother had died, and it was still the 6 kids and your father, and you were without a mother.
Yeah, you were without a mother. Yeah. And my older sister used to take care of the store. At that time, we didn't have the store and house together. We were living in, we had our own home in a different street. And the store was downtown. It wasn't together. So my sister used to go to the store every day, around the store. And somehow or other, she was taking in enough money to keep going, so we'd have a living, have for groceries, medicines, and all that. And then when she come home, she'd pitch in. But there were, at home, there were some people, come to think of that, would come in. There was a cousin of my father's, that would come in and lend a hand. And the second cousin of mother's, I think, that used to come in
Yeah.
and do a little something, help them
Yeah.
out, cook a little,
Yeah.
So they'd have, after that was later, they were cooked for them first. But mother actually didn't die only from typhoid fever. She developed, there were some complications. I think that she must have either had cancer or gallstone or something, or gallbladder trouble, and with the typhoid fever, it flared up to the point where they couldn't. They had conferences, doctors' conferences and whatnot. They didn't find any way they could save her.
How old was she?
42 years old. Young woman. I think she was 42 or 40. I think she was 42 years old.
It's been a terrible thing. I mean,
Yeah.
you went away, and 6
Yeah.
weeks later you came back, and your mother was gone.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah. It was we had a very, for all the people, she had to be the one to die. That's how luck strikes sometimes. Misfortune can be a terrible thing. So then after that, we sort of set up, kind of pulled together again, and father figured that the best thing to do is to move back close to the store, back of the store, so he'd be there. And my older sister was taking care of the house. He had to have a woman in the house to help her.
at a time
Yeah.
like, oh, I see, to help take care of the house.
Yeah.
At a time like that, when something, I mean, I can't imagine anything harder for a 12-year-old kid to go through it. At a time like that, when you were going through that, how did you all get through it? I mean, emotionally, what did you all do to get through that time? Was your father there for you then, or were you sort of on your own emotionally, or?
Yeah, we were. Of course, there is one thing about that we have in the Jewish religion that you probably saw that when you went to temple, that we have the Kaddish, and
Right.
strange as it seems, that Kaddish does have something to do with emotionally pulling together
Yeah.
the. So as far as us boys are concerned,
Right.
we were more or less having that feeling together. I
You
can
would go
say
Kaddish
through the
together.
Kaddish and all
Sometimes
that.
you did.
Yeah, you take for instance, imagine imagine a father there standing up in the Kaddish, and me next to him and Alfred next to him. Of course, Izzy was too young at the time to say Kaddish. And we were more or less together in that feeling. So it's maybe in our subconscious mind. Now that you're asking me, which I think is a very good question, I can see where that setup, that certain arrangement was a was some real emotional therapy. I mean, therapy, good therapy, mental therapy, I should say, for us. We all sort of felt that we had somebody. We weren't left altogether without anything.
What year was it?
That was in the year of 1915 to 16, about 1915 to 1916, yes. Something like that.
It was just before the war? Or?
It was, the war in Europe was started already, but Romania wasn't involved yet.
Right.
Then Romania became involved, I think. It was right before the war. I think that's the reason why we got the typhoid fever. Somehow or other, we got it from the war that went on in other countries.
In what way?
In the other countries. Well, it's probably through the river, or who knows how. You know that the river might have carried the germ.
Germs, yeah.
Yeah. And Romania was a backward country, but they were using privies over there, and the water would run from where we used to get our water from in the yard. I wouldn't be surprised that the faucet was maybe about 10, 12 feet away from the privies.
Wow.
So all there had to be is a little leak, and,
That was it.
and that's it. Yeah.
So you're
Yeah.
12 and a half.
No, over there it was a little further in where we lived, over in where we lived. But of course, you might have contacted the store. That's where, you can't tell. That's where it was that close. Mm-hmm.
So what happened? A lady moved in to help take care of the house?
No, we got over there maid. No, well, housekeeper, maid, mostly a maid.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was very hard to get a maid because hard to get the right maid because they used to take advantage of the fact my sister was a young girl, and one time father went to take baths during the summer, and the maid that we had was a very fine-looking woman, nice maid. All the police, the sergeants of police and all that, they were all crazy about her. And one day, my sister comes into her room, and she has her trousseau box open or something, and she looks in her trousseau chest,
Yeah.
and she sees a lot of our linens in there.
She was making herself a trousseau.
Yeah. She was picking herself up a trousseau. And naturally, we used to get to, one would come, the other one would go, the other one would come. You know, to always have somebody to help her to clean house, help with the cooking and all that. Some of the maids we had were very good cooks. They used to work in homes that they had good cooks, and they'd come around and teach our sisters yet how to cook.
Well, tell me more about your father. I mean, I mean, he obviously worked hard, but he didn't work every night. I mean, he must have had time off.
No, I don't think that my father worked hard.
No?
No, because he used to enjoy whatever work he did. He was a born salesman like Alfred, and he used to enjoy selling, which was a pleasure for him. So that wasn't, you can't consider that hard work.
Right.
Every day he'd have somebody come over, one of the teachers in the... as a matter of fact, one of the teachers that used to come over used to be your great-grandfather.
Come to the house.
Come to the store.
To the store.
And they'd play chess for a couple of hours.
While he was working.
The store would be out there, and if a customer would come in, he'd excuse himself and go and wait on the customer and come back and play chess. Then when 4 o'clock used to come around, most of the time they'd serve tea. So they'd have tea. But every day he'd play chess. And sometimes they'd get into the worst fight about a chess game. No money or anything, but they'd argue about it so badly that, my God, that if the doors were open, you could hear them a mile away. Because one would say, well, no, you moved there. And the other one would say, well, no, how could I move there? Am I going to give you that piece?
How
stupid can I be?
So who is this he was playing with?
Well, one of them was a Professor Zinger,
Yeah.
who was a Hebrew professor,
Right.
and German and Hebrew.
Right.
And the other one was your great-grandfather. No, your great-grandfather's name was Zinger.
Yeah.
That's right.
My great-grandfather's name was what?
Was Zinger, not Geller.
Zinger.
Zinger, yeah. But then they changed it to Geller
Oh,
because I don't know why there was some mix-up there. So,
Yeah.
so they changed it to Geller.
Yeah.
So, and then another teacher's name was Zilber. Zilber.
Yeah.
That means silver, you know.
Right.
And and then there were other people. Those fellows I remember well because they were my teachers, naturally.
Yeah.
So, by the way, your great-grandfather prepared me for the bar mitzvah.
This was Zinger.
Zinger, that's
Whose
right.
first name was what?
I don't remember his first name. I don't think we ever knew it.
My great-grandfather.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, your Salo Geller's father.
Salo Geller's
Father.
Okay.
I think.
Right.
So then the others were different people in town, like for instance the rabbi's son, Leon. He would play with father, and the other son too would play with father, but they were real good.
Chess players.
Yeah, they were real good chess players. They were college men. One of them finally got a PhD. But then the store, I mean, my father's store was known as the chess club in town.
Yeah.
If people came to town, they said, "Who want to know who plays chess here? Where should I go
Right.
to?" They'd come over there to play
Yeah.
chess. Well, so as such, they would have sometimes some people that would come there that were just visiting. If you want to hear a sort of an incident that's a little bit risque,
Oh,
can I say it?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, my sister Tony was already about 21 or 22 years old. And over there, girls are supposed to be very innocent.
Yeah.
They don't know anything about anything until they get married.
Right.
So at 22, she knew very little.
Right.
So one time a fellow, I don't know what his name is or anything, came to Fokshan and want to know where he can go to play a game of chess. And they told him, go to Davidesco, that is to our store. He comes over there, and he comes once and twice, and every time he comes with a briefcase. He was sent there, I think he was a lawyer, and he was sent there to settle a certain case, a financial case or something like that, and he had to be there for quite a few days. The second or third day he comes there, he opens his briefcase to take out something from the briefcase to show to Dad, and out falls a condom on the floor. Well, they didn't see the condom. And they play chess and they get through,
Right.
and they leave, and he leaves. And my sister comes around to straighten out the way it is over there. The girl has to come and has to straighten out, even put the chess
Right.
game away after they're through playing.
Right.
And she sees the condom on the floor. She doesn't know what in the world that is. She takes the condom to Father, and she said, Father, look at Mr. So-and-so, look at what he dropped. He'll probably miss it.
Yeah.
Because he.
Yeah.
So Father took the thing away from her, and first he got terribly mad.
Right.
He was caught unawares, and he got red in the face and terribly mad. Then he realized that, geez, poor girl, she doesn't know what the thing is. So she said, oh, that's all right, don't worry about it, I'll give it back to you.
That's wonderful. And she never even knew what it was.
Well, that'll give you an idea of how girls
And she was how old
were.
then?
She said she was about 22 years old. I wasn't there at the time, but she told me
told
about
you
it. I
the
thought that, yeah, she told me this time when she was.
Tony just told you this.
Yeah. So,
that's
so you
wonderful.
see, yeah. But of course, sometimes there were some people we don't know. One time he was playing, he started playing chess with the German soldiers. When the German soldiers were occupying Fokshan, that was also the club of the Germans. And by the way, may I go on to that?
Yeah, oh, sure.
There was as a matter of fact, there was one soldier, a plain soldier, I don't think, by the name of Ahus, and he was one of the champions, chess champions. He wasn't that good, but he was among the top. He was good enough to assist a hand that played Casablanca, who was a champion at the time. So Ahus was about the best chess player that ever walked there in the house. But I suppose he could have even played Casablanca, but that's the way he... then there was a Hauptmann Knell, a captain who was also a very good chess player who came in the house there to play. And there were quite a few, I don't remember all of them, that used to come in there to play chess. But our store was the headquarters for playing chess.
Were you kind of, you were young then, did you kind of aspire to being one of those, I mean, were you sort of hang around the fringes, or?
I used to watch the games, yes. I used to watch the games. They used to interest me. Not all the time, but whenever I felt like it. But I never developed a real liking for chess.
Right.
I used to like backgammon much better,
Right.
because backgammon is an easier game, and it depends a lot on the luck with backgammon. Chess is all brain work.
All skill. What was, it doesn't sound like it was too difficult there during the occupation,
What
the German occupation.
No, we had it very good during the German occupation. For one thing, I learned German. I learned to speak German very well. And the Germans in those days were very good people. If you want me to tell you something that happened one time that was very interesting, I think, that one time a German soldier came into the store and said he wants to buy a watch.
Yeah.
And Father showed him a few watches, and he said, I like this watch here. So Father said, he asked him, how much is this watch?
Right.
And Father said it was 12 marks.
Yeah.
And the soldier said, 12 marks is too much.
Right.
He said, if it's too much, you don't have to buy it. But are you such a great connoisseur to know how much, you're the expert to know how much the watch is worth? He said, if you don't want to buy the watch, if you think it's too much, you don't have to buy it. So he said, no, I want the watch. He said, well, if you want the watch, you'll have to pay me for it. So he said, no, I won't pay you anything for it. So he said, no, you will pay. He said, because you don't get things for nothing here. So he said, no, this watch isn't going to cost me anything. He said, no, you leave the watch here then. So he takes the watch and starts putting the watch in his pocket and all that.
Wow.
And Father said, reaches out to get the watch, so he pulls a vein, a bull's vein, you know.
Yeah.
They carried bull's vein for whips.
Wow.
It pulls a bull's vein out of his boot, and he wants to raises his
Right.
arm to strike
Right.
Father over the head with the
Right.
bull's vein. So Father was a bigger man and taller, so he stops his hand from hitting him, and he tells me, go call the patrol. I go out to call the patrol, and I can't find the patrol, but I find two German officers, and I explain to them, look, there is a so-and-so and so-and-so, what happened, and I said, I can't find the patrol. So they said, come on, let's go, let's see where it is. And they come over there, and they ask the German, let me see your identification. He pulls out his identification, and they mark down his name and all that, and they tell him, all right, now you go ahead. Get away from here.
Right.
Said,
Yeah.
and then they remain there, and they tell Father, they say, don't worry, you'll be called, and you'll have to attend the trial,
Wow.
and we'll see what we'll do about it. And after a while, they call him to, no, before they call him to the trial, this fellow comes in,
Yeah.
this German soldier, and tells Father, that look at, he was a corporal, by the way, that
Right.
fellow who did
Right.
it. So it tells him, look at, if you're the only one who can help me. He said, I was drunk at the time, I don't usually do those things, and why I did it, I don't know, but if you don't help me, why then they'll really throw the book at me.
Right.
So he goes to trial, and when Father goes to they call Father to testify, he said that he would wish that they would go easy on him because the man was drunk and all that probably, and they shouldn't be so hard with him. So the judge opened up on Father and bawled him out. He said that, no, he said, you have no right to testify in his favor, to say anything in his favor. He came in, and when he acted that way, you just can't. He said, we come here as enemies of the government. We don't come here as enemies of the people. And when the trial was over, he was sentenced to 3 years, and he was degraded. Yeah. He couldn't do anything for him. See, so it was a different Germany.
Yeah, I was just going to say, some difference.
Different Germany. See. So you know that one person that I know, no lady, as a matter of fact, my piano teacher, she one time was talking about the Nazis, and I said, how could people turn like this?
Right. This is recently.
Yeah. I said, how could people turn like this, the same people to become Nazis and all that? He said, it's very hard to explain, but sometimes my grandfather, or her grandfather, that's an long time ago, used to say when he used to come from fishing, that he said people love fishing, but he said it's sure is a dirty sport.
Yeah.
And he said it's probably that's how those Nazis did it. They were just too blind to realize that these weren't fish that they did it to.
Jeez.
And she was the time who knew something about it, because she claimed that her grandmother in Holland was hiding Jews during Bismarck's time, because they had a Holocaust, sort of a Holocaust during Bismarck's time too. Yes, the Jews. So she knew about it. But that's what happened during the Germans' time.
Well, let me ask you this. Now, there's two things that come to mind that you mentioned. The first is, you were talking about all these college people, that would come to play chess and stuff, and what were your feelings about, going on to college at that time?
No, I didn't. I didn't care for college.
No interest.
No interest. I didn't have it. I had my interest all the way through. Ever since I was a kid, when I was real young, I wanted to be a banker.
Right.
When I got, ever since I remember, I can say since I started school, as soon as I realized, I can say that I was probably Stephen's age now, how Stephen seems to realize about money, have to be conscious of money and all that. That's how I was conscious of money. I want to be a banker.
At 7.
At 7, yeah.
That's great.
And after that, when the Germans came, and as a matter of fact, before the Germans came, the Russians came, and I was that young. Why, I was after business. I used to buy tobacco and cigarette fillers, cigarette papers, those ready-made fillers. I'd fill the cigarettes with tobacco and put them up in boxes of 100 and sell cigarettes.
This is when you were how old?
I'm a little bit mixed up on that thing. I think that I must have been about 14, 15 years old at the time when the Germans came, when the Russians came. And then when the Germans came, I was old enough already to the point where I even learned a little bit about the jewelry business. And I started selling. I was good at selling. When I was, to show you how much I was for business, I'll give you an idea with this example. That when the Russians were there, the ruble, which was the Russian money, was worth more on the exchange than the Romanian lei. So if a Russian...
When were the Russians there?
Huh?
When was it?
It must have been around 15, around the time, right before yeah, it must have been around 1915, around that time, when Mother died, right after Mother died, I'd say.
What were they doing there?
The Russians were fighting the Germans.
I see.
So the Russians were our allies.
But nobody was fighting in your town?
It finally settled down to in our town. That was the border where they stopped. The Russians finally admitted defeat in our town. The border was about the front line was about 4 or 5 miles away from the center of town. Yes, it was walking distance.
But there was no actual fighting going on in the town?
No actual fighting. They all declared it an open town when the Russians left.
I see.
When the Russians left...
You just missed the war. I mean, you just missed being...
being drafted, yes. I missed being drafted because they started drafting boys around 16, 17, but very, very few, very few. By the way, anyway, the Russians were in our town.
Right.
To go back to this point,
Right.
so the exchange was in favor of the Russian money.
Right.
So when I sell them something, I'd get the rubles from them, the Russian money, and then when I had to give them change, I'd say, well, I'll have to give you Romanian lei.
Right.
Naturally, I'd make money on the
Right.
exchange.
You were a banker already.
Yes. And believe it or not, I'd be left with the safe open, with all the Russians running around there. The safe was open. I'd go, all the money was there. The merchandise was there and all that. And Father would go, because over there you have to go to the bathhouse. Like he'd go to the bathhouse on Friday. You know,
Right.
every Friday he'd have to go to
Right.
bathhouse. And I'd be left alone in the store and around the store and all that. And sometimes I'd even do a little repairs or something like that if it was necessary. Of course, I wasn't too good on that yet. But then when the Russians left, when they retreated, we had a very hard time, and we were hiding in we were hiding in the basement. And up there, you know, the Russians were building fires. Right in our backyard, they were building fire. We had a chicken and a rooster there. We were getting an egg every day. So they broke into the hen house there, and they stole the chicken and rooster and cooked them. And I was supposed to stand guard.
Yeah.
You know, I was just a little kid like that, and I was stand. So one time I saw a Russian getting a little too close, and I hollered at him, "Hey, you!" Believe it or not, he'd go away.
Went away.
He went away. They were timid. You know, they weren't. They'd kill somebody, but otherwise they were timid
Right.
for anyone that. And but so that happened while they retreated, and we were so worried. Then all of a sudden, the people that were guarding, their father was guarding the front, I was guarding in back,
Right.
neighbors were guarding around there. So while then the people who were guarding came around, they opened the door and they said, well, the Russians are leaving. The Russians were leaving at night, and the Germans walked in, and the morning, early in the morning, everybody was out there welcoming the Germans and all
welcoming
that,
the-
cheering them in, like, you know. They not only they were the Romanians too. The Romanians, the allies of the Russians, you know. After all, we were justified, you know, a little bit as Jews because we didn't have it too well under
Yeah.
the Romanians.
That's right.
But the Romanians themselves.
Okay.
You're on.
To go back to when the Russians were in our town,
And today is
and today is September the 17th, Friday, 1976. The one incident that I remember very vividly was when the colonel, who was the in charge of our town, came in to the store and wanted to have a crystal put on his watch. And after Father got through putting the crystal on his watch, and he wanted, set the watch for him and everything, while the colonel takes a look at the watch, and the second hand on the watch wasn't turning. So he got terribly mad, and he pulled out his scimitar. He was a Cossack colonel. He pulled out his scimitar and said, "Look, you broke my watch," in Russian, however it was, and what's the matter? How come I bring the watch in and everything, and you break it for me instead of fixing it? Jeez, we got terribly upset about it. We really got scared, all of us that were in the store when that happened. So it was fortunate that Father looked at the watch, and he noticed that the hands happened to catch, the minute hand happened to catch onto the second hand. Due to the fact that the crystal was broke, the minute hand got bent, and it was too low. So he called his attention to it, and he said, "Look, for God's sake, it's just a matter of the hand bending down. So what are you making so much fuss about? So he kind of quietened him down. But meanwhile, we went to a quiet session.
Boy, what year was this?
That must have been around 1916, 1917, something like that, around that time. So you can imagine how happy we were after the Russians left, and as I told you, the Germans came in. When the Germans came in, everything went along in a more civilized fashion. However, we didn't have food. Food was very, very scarce. Because they didn't have, they were short in grains. They couldn't import anything. Naturally, they couldn't import anything from the Germans couldn't import anything from America. America was just about getting ready to get into war with Germany too around that time, and they weren't supplying any food to the Germans. The Russian granaries were shut off from them due to the fact they were enemies. So they gave us some real black bread to eat. And that was more or less rationed. We were getting something like one bread a week, but the bread was of such poor quality and so bad that sometimes the whole grain would be in it. Yeah. Whole grains, and some of the black chaff was in the bread and all that. Fortunately, we had a lot of business, doing a lot of business with the German soldiers. Every now and then they would give us some bread. We got to know some of the soldiers and everything, and we fared a little better. However, meat was completely out. It was almost impossible to get meat. Father was eating only kosher. He wouldn't eat any other kind of meat, so as such he wouldn't have any meat at all. But we would still have meat because he would allow us to eat treifa meat.
Right.
He would substitute for meat, in his case, what he would substitute with some other vegetables and all that, and mushrooms especially were a good substitute for meat. And but as far as business is concerned, business was very good, and the father was making money mostly from work, because their merchandise was almost impossible to obtain. And
so he was fixing watches?
He was fixing watches, and he hired some of the soldiers even to help some, and some refugees. Somehow or other he managed to be able to keep the watches in good shape for the German soldiers, and the Germans were very good customers. They didn't bargain and all that and try to chew them down like the Russians or the Romanians, and he was very satisfied. He spoke a very good German, and he got to be friendly with quite a few of them. One of them, I think I mentioned before, was this Hauptmann Knell, who used to come in and talk religion a lot with him and play chess also. Your great-grandfather's brother, as a matter of fact, was Hauptmann Knell's right-hand man. He was his interpreter. He was used to go around, and every now and then he'd come in and say hello, and to let us know that Hauptmann Knell will be in this and this time to see him. Apropos to your great-grandfather's brother around the same time at your great-grandfather's place, home, arrived a great-grandfather's sister from America.
Oh, yeah?
With 2 children. One child's name was Henry Weissman, and the other one and his sister Sarah Weissman.
Mm-hmm.
And of course they were little kids. The sister was a very sick woman. A lot of people said that she had TB or something. And she came over there, and she was able to live a little longer over there. She lived in Fokshan. Her husband stayed in Chicago.
What about the kids?
They went to school. They were living with the grandparents, with your great-grandfather.
So the kids stayed there in Fokshan?
The kids stayed in Fokshan and went to school. And your great-grandfather's sister, the one who also came eventually here to America, she died as a young woman of cancer. She was there too. She was about my age, and we used to go to the same school, but not in the same class because it wasn't. They had a girls' school and a boys' school. I went to boys' school, and she went to girls' school. It was a community school, Jewish community school.
Right.
Well, school there wasn't. School wasn't operating around that time. I was making a little money by manufacturing cigarettes and selling flashlight batteries and flashlights too, by the way, and making the cigarettes, selling cigars too. The Germans were big cigar smokers. So I'd buy from one soldier and sell the other, and I was able to make a few pennies. One of the reasons why I was doing that was to save, according to my father's advice and plan, enough money to go to either Israel, in those days was called Palestine, or to America.
This is when you were how old now?
I must have been around 12 and a half, 13 years old at the time. Meanwhile, hanging around there, I learned to repair clocks and watches and all that. Watches very little, but clocks anyway. I got to know enough about that. So when I was needed, I would lend a hand on that too. Otherwise, I was busy with my own business.
Mm-hmm.
Things went along very well, and like I say, with the Germans, as far as business and making a living is concerned. One day, Professor Zilber, who was playing chess with Father, came in, and he told Father that Professor Zinger, who was your great-grandfather, was very sick.
My great-grand,
Salos, yeah, your grandfather Salos' father,
right,
was very sick. And that not only is he sick, but as we know, how hard it is to get food. And besides that, he's got his daughter there with 2 children, and they're doing very badly, very poorly. And if he could possibly do something for him or something, it would be a big mitzvah.
Right.
So as soon as Father got a chance, he got together some food from around the house and went over to Professor Zinger's house and took along and paid him a visit. Of course, Father was very busy in those days, and just to even go there, it was a sacrifice in a way for him. But he did. Of course, Father was very charitable, was one of the most charitable people in Fokshan, and he was supposed to be a very fair-minded man. As such, when there was some misunderstanding among the Jewish people in town, they used to, instead of going to the court immediately, they would first have an arbitrage to try to settle their disputes. And in a majority of cases, you can say Father was one of the three arbiters to judge those cases, because they felt that he was very fair. Of course, he wasn't an elected position or anything like that, but it was the request of the people that were involved in the dispute. So, and naturally, even during the days of the war, and even he used to go very religiously to temple every morning and every evening. Of course, Saturday was no work or anything like that. The incident about how it was with the Germans and how fair they were, I think I related to you, so I can keep on going from there.
You wanted me to ask you about remind you about the marbles.
Oh, well, that was when we went to school. I wanted to mention that I always sort of had an eye for business.
Right.
So marbles were being played very much by the kids in our town. And we used to have a way of exchanging, and we'd find that the big marbles were worth more than the little marbles, so we changed some of the big marbles for the little marbles, and somehow or other, whoever used to have a better head for business would naturally wind up the winner. So we were three partners, three fellows that hung around together most of the times. So one fellow's name was Scharf, and the other fellow's name was Hellner. Scharf, by the way, became an electronic engineer, and now he's in Israel. And Hellner became a dentist, and he's in Paris. Hellner did very well, but he never got married. Scharf got married to a physician, and he never had any children, though. He doesn't have any children. But anyway, we got onto an idea between me and Hellner and Scharf that we could manufacture marbles. So we got a hold of some clay, and we would roll the clay, nice big-sized marbles. The bigger, the better. Right. And to give them color, we used to mix them with ochre, so they'd be beautifully red. And then we take the marbles and change them for nicely manufactured marbles that could be sold for a good price. So it worked out all right. Especially I didn't get much money for spending money for buying a bar of chocolate. Of course, not that it was available much at the time, but you still could get it here and there or anything like that. So this money kind of helped me if I wanted to get a bar of chocolate or some candy sometimes. That's what the marble. Well, after that, as I told you, there was no school. However, before
after what there was no school.
When the Germans came, school there, they couldn't continue school. Up to the time, by the time the school wasn't continued anymore, I got to get into the second grade. I would call it junior high. And over there in school, by the way, the system is a little different than here. While I studied German in grammar school, throughout grammar school, and Hebrew also throughout grammar school, in high school, the first year we studied French, and the second year they added on German. Well, naturally, German was a little easier subject because I had quite a bit of it before. As far as other subjects that we studied in school around, especially in high school, were more or less liberal subjects. We studied history. The first year we studied ancient history.
Right.
We studied, the first year we studied zoology. And another subject that we studied the first year was in math. We studied for the first year algebra. Over there they start with algebra. No, we studied geometry.
First.
They teach you geometry in over there without algebra because everything is proved by angles. We didn't study to prove anything algebraically. So we studied geometry first, yeah. Then in second year they added on algebra.
Well, now.
And math.
Yeah. Well, now you said, but when the Germans came, there was no more school.
Yeah, when the Germans came, I was just about 12 and a half or 13 years old, as I told you. Then there was no more school. For maybe about a year or two, I can't recollect whether there was any school at all during the time of the Germans. But I would say that almost at the same time, coincidental with the Germans' departure, that they reopened the schools. And they reopened our school. Since it was run by the Jewish community, they felt that it would be better to have for the Jewish boys a business college instead of regular. So they changed it to a business college, and they added on bookkeeping. And it seems like all the boys went to business college. They transferred to business college instead of, not only they transferred to business college because they liked it better, but Jewish boys had a hard time getting into high school.
Is that right?
Yes, it was. You could almost count the number of boys going to the regular junior high or high school on your fingers.
What was it like being Jewish in Fokshan in those days?
It was very rough. You were always reminded that you were Jewish. It was so bad that one dentist over there by the name of Fleetman, who studied to be a dentist in Chicago and got his license in Chicago too and came back to practice in Fokshan, married a Gentile woman. And his son used to go to school with Alfred, I think, my brother Alfred. He was about the same age. And he used to call the Jewish boys, "You dirty Jew." In other words, he was a great, he was a big shot because his father. And strange as it seems, his father one time became head of the community, of the Jewish community. In Fokshan. I don't know whether he wanted to do that to clear his conscience, but he was all right, though. I think that there was quite a mix-up. I don't think there were as many really anti-Semitic people as you would think they were, but it was more like a style to say, "You dirty Jew." So they all knew that if they're not Jewish, they have to call a Jew, "You dirty Jew."
How many Jewish people were there in the community?
Oh, I would say that half the city was
right?
Jewish, yes, because they had quite a few temples and all that. And the Jewish boys sometimes would have to walk miles, actually, to school. Yeah, and some of them didn't have shoes. So before winter, like for instance for Rosh Hashanah, okay, you know, it's coincidental now that it's right before Rosh Hashanah. Before Rosh Hashanah and before Pesach, the Jewish community would send in a tailor and a shoemaker, and would take he would take the measurements of the boys and make them clothes and make them shoes for winter. Give them overcoats. It was very, very nice.
You were remembering that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But after, like I said, during the...
Did you have shoes?
Oh yes, yes. Father always managed to have enough. As a matter of fact, Father was very charitable. He was very charitable. He did so well, and I wouldn't be surprised that for the amount of money that he had or he made, he was probably the most charitable man in the city. The city had one rabbi, Rabbi Nacht, by the way, who was, I think he was from Germany, and he was more or less a fancy rabbi. I mean, real well-studied, maybe went to college and all that. Rabbi Nacht, by the way, was distantly related to your great-grandfather, to the Zingers.
Right.
So Father saw the need in our town that we need also a rabbi for the poorer people. So he went around, looked around, and he heard that the rabbi wants to change his town and all that, and he managed to bring that rabbi to our city. At that time, we lived in our home away from before Mother died. We lived in our home, and there was a home that we owned right next to us, maybe about 15 or 20 feet away, but its own yard and all that. Was a regular home and good size, and was a saloon at one time.
Yeah.
So he brought the rabbi over, and he told him, look, there is a nice room over there. The saloon is a big room, and you've got about 4 or 5 rooms in the back. So you come over and open a bas midrash, which means a little synagogue over there, and you live in the back, and you'll manage. You'll get plenty of people to follow you. You can have services for Yontif and all that. He brought them over, and they went around. They made benches and chairs and whatnot, and he opened a bas midrash, which is a synagogue over there in front, and he lived in back. And he had all kinds of children. He was good in having children. He got a house full of children, but we got to be very friendly because we lived right next door, next yard. So we got to be very friendly. One of those children is that Leon that I told you about in Israel. He got to, they all got very well educated. Leon even studied at Oxford and at Frankfurt, and got a PhD. The rabbi's son. He took so well care of the rabbi that it ties in with the Germans being there. During the time of the Germans there, my father got married again.
You were about...
Well, I was about, it was 3 years after Mother died, 3-4 years, so I must have been about 15 and a half, 16 years old.
Now, before you tell me about that, because that's an important thing to talk about, when you got so sad when you were talking about the shoes and the guy making the shoes, what was it that you remember about that makes you so sad? I mean, what was the...
Well, it reminds me about the way those poor kids would go to school barefoot, and sometimes even when it was really wet and cold out, and you'd see them wipe their noses because they would, their noses were always running because they were allergic and whatnot.
Wow.
It was a very sad situation.
How many
The
families?
kids, the kids were even given lunches in school like they do here now. That's way back.
Yeah.
Imagine 60 years or over. See, they were given hot lunches. They didn't have anything. But just to show you how poor some people were over there. Friday, right before Saturday, the poor people would walk around on the street and go from one house to the other, from one store to the other, and put their hands out to get some money handed to them. And pretty near everybody, not only father, would put out a bladder full of change, and when they come in, they knew that so much money has to go to the poor.
Wow.
It was almost like a law. Well, it makes me feel bad to think that things were that bad over there.
How many? Now you're talking about the Jewish community.
The Jewish community, yeah. The Gentile community didn't take care of their people so well. No. That's something that, for one thing, not only didn't they take care of the Jews, but they didn't take care of their own people. If somebody was poor over there, they had to stand in the marketplace and sit all day on the ground and have their hands out, and with babies sometimes or anything like that. If they were well enough to get a little money to do a little work so they can accumulate a little money, why they were. But a lot of them were just left. A lot of them that I remember started to be out there in the marketplace when they were maybe about 10, 11 years old. They'd already stand out there and try to get some little work to do. And as soon as they got a hold of a little money, though, trouble was that they didn't spend it for food. They would usually be begging right next to a saloon. As soon as they got the money, they'd go into the saloon and get their drink. And they used to drink some of the poorest liquor that there ever was. I would compare it like here to that poor drink that the Mexicans have. No, not tequila, no, maqui. The one that they make out of the maqui plant, I forget. Pulque.
Yeah.
Very, very poor drink. It was burning their guts out. And then sometimes they'd get to be 20, 25 years old, and you'd pass by the marketplace, and the next day you wouldn't see them anymore. They just died away. For them to live to be 20, 25 years was a very, very old age. Yeah. And the Jewish people used to take care of their people. Of course, they couldn't take care of the Gentiles, you know. Yeah. So
Anyway, you were saying your father got remarried.
Father got married
To who?
to Matilda. Matilda was a refugee from Bukovina, and she.
What is Bukovina?
Bukovina was a territory that belonged to Austria, but at one time belonged to Romania. And they didn't speak Romanian very well, but they spoke a little Romanian, but they spoke mostly German, Austrian type of German. And there is one thing that I sort of feel guilty about it, that when he got married, I was very resentful about.
You were.
Naturally, in a way, I was, I felt there was somebody else coming to take mother's place.
Sure.
So,
You were about 15?
but I was about 15, yeah, around that time. The Germans were still in our town, naturally. And, but not long after, though, I got to realize that he did a good thing for marrying her, because he needed a woman in the house, and while she wasn't, I don't think she was even maybe meaner than other women, to be frank with you. I think she just had that woman instinct in her, and she was a typical woman. She had two nieces and a nephew staying with her.
Yeah.
And the nieces and nephews' mother died about the same time that my mother died. So when she took care of the nieces and nephews, and she always sort of was hoping that her brother-in-law would marry her, which is supposed to be according to Jewish law.
Yeah,
and she
right.
was supposed to be very religious. But he was a stinker, and instead of marrying her, she was good to his children as a mother, or maybe even better, he fell in love with some woman who was quite a bit younger than her, and than him, pardon me, and he just wanted to marry that woman, and he didn't pay too much attention to her. So when father married his sister-in-law, he was in a way happy about it, but he was unhappy due to the fact that now he wouldn't have anybody take care of his family. As soon as father married, naturally she couldn't take her children, the children with her to our house because they weren't her children. So he sent his children to a Catholic school. He sent them in Bucharest to Catholic school, that boarding school,
Right.
It was a very fine school, no doubt about it,
Yeah.
but the girls got to learn German very well and all that. It was a German Catholic school.
Mm-hmm.
And the little one, he told his wife, look at, how can the little one hurt you? That was Emma, is his wife.
Mm-hmm.
How can Emma hurt you? Let's take Emma with us at least. So they took Emma with them, and the others went to the Catholic school. That is two girls, one of them Regina and Emma. Regina and the other one is Clara, and Herman, a boy.
When
When father married this woman.
she brought them.
No, she didn't. She brought only Emma.
Emma only.
Emma only. And Clara and Regina went to and Herman, the
Right.
boy, went to. They were actually 4 children, but she didn't have Regina with her. Regina was. That's why I said that she had only 3 children with her. So finally she took Emma, but Emma was doing so badly under her. She was a typical stepmother, that woman that he married. She was so bad that she didn't want to have Emma walk along with her on the street for fear that people will think that she's too old a woman, that she's got a child that old.
Jeez.
So when they used to go, Emma,
How old was she?
Emma was
No.
about, who? That woman?
Matilda?
No, Matilda wasn't the woman. I forgot what her name. The woman that fellow married,
Right.
Rudich was his name.
Right.
He was about. She must have been about 35, 38, 30.
Okay, before we had a little tape problem there, but you know where we were.
Yeah, you let me know when to start.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
She used to take Emma along, for instance, when she'd go marketing. And Emma would carry the basket with her stuff back of her.
Yeah.
And the people would stop with her on the street and say, "Oh, hello, how are you?" And who is the little girl? She would say, "Oh, she's a little girl, works for me."
Wow.
Wow. So that, of course, those were the old days. Today maybe should be different. I don't know. At any rate, the things went along this way. Meanwhile, the rabbi that father brought to Fokshan was doing better and better all the time, and he bought the temple where and the place that he used to live in.
Right.
And father had a chance to buy better location for the store, but a house with and all that attached to it and whatnot. And so the father bought the better location, and he made it possible for the rabbi to buy the temple, the synagogue, and the house. Then eventually he even made it possible for the rabbi to buy the other house that we used to live in before before mother died. And Tante used to manage quite well, and then there was the armistice. Before you knew it, why there was an armistice between the Germans and the Romanians.
Yeah.
So during the armistice, people used to sneak across the border and go into old Romania. Father took a trip to see my sister, who was married in a different town in Romania. Right. He snuck across the border, and he brought back a little food and brought back a few bottles of oil, which was in very short supply, just plain oil, cooking oil.
Right.
And naturally he was glad to see his daughter over there. That is my sister. That was our oldest sister, Chile, who is dying now. And the Germans were in town for, I'd say, about a year after the armistice. And everything was at a standstill because there was no fighting and all that. And we got accustomed to the life, more or less. Meanwhile, this country went to war with Germany. And I remember one time men coming into the store telling father, "What do you think about this blockade that Germany is putting on the shipments of America to Europe and all that?" Well, when the Germans when the America went to war, there was a little disturbance there because many people just didn't know where they stand. They didn't know whether they should side with the Germans or whether they should side with the Americans or with the others. I think that on a whole, I would say that they were glad they were left alone. They were more or less neutral. You know, there might have been a few rebels or a few agitators, but they didn't count much. Besides that, we were still under martial law actually there, so things were very quiet. When the war was over, I think it was about 1918 or so, why the Germans gave in. They had to retreat. So when they retreated in very very good style. There was no disturbance at all, and we started to have more circulation between the old occupied Romania and the part that the Germans occupied and all that. By that time, I got to know quite a bit. I learned quite a bit about the jewelry business. I was very talented as far as selling is concerned, and I also knew the repairs. But my talent actually consisted more in the selling end. Well, there was such a big demand after that for people to work in jewelry stores and all that, that in Bucharest they were paying a very, very high salaries for almost anybody who was able to work in a jewelry store. And as a matter of fact, the salary that people were getting over there was even larger than what Father used to make in his own business. So I was tempted about that. One time, a fellow that Father knew, and he helped him to get out of the army, as a matter of fact, and he felt obligated to Father, came into the store, and he had a jewelry store in Bucharest. So I said, Father, I begged Father and coaxed him and all that to ask him to take me with him to Bucharest so I can get a job. For one thing, I said, look, I'll go to Bucharest, I'll get a job, I'll be able to make some money, and I'll be able to send some money home so that I will have a dowry for my other sister, for Lucia.
Mm-hmm.
So finally, Father consented that I should go to Bucharest. I went to Bucharest, and the first 2-3 nights I stayed with this fellow who brought me down there and had a room in back of his store. He had a very small store near the railroad station, but he was doing a very, very thriving business.
Right.
So after the third or fourth night, he said, look, I have somebody come, my brother is coming here, and I need a room. I haven't got any other place to... as a matter of fact, I think I slept in the same bed with him. Yeah, there was. So he said, my brother is coming, and I can't keep you. So I didn't know where to go. We had a cousin in Bucharest, though, that was a cousin on mother's side, and he used to be sort of a commission man, but he never made enough money. So his wife used to keep 2-3 boarders. One of the boarders was her husband's brother, as a matter of fact, another cousin of mine. So the only thing I could do is go over there and ask them if they have a place for me. So they took me on board over there, and I went to look for a job. I went to a wholesale house that Father used to do business with. And as soon as I told him that I'm Father's son, he said, oh, sure, you've got a job here.
Yeah.
And they gave me a job, and not only did they give me a job, but they gave me board. Not room, but board, because they didn't have room for me. They might have given me a place to sleep, too. But I don't think I ever ate in any place where they would serve any better, or they had any better food than they had over there. He was a very rich man. I think eventually he got to be the richest man in Bucharest. Fellow by name of Segalescu, and he was hated by everybody because he was very tight.
Yeah.
He was so tight that he used to lock up the schmaltz for Pesach. He used to lock it up down in his safe. You know, the downstairs of the safe was made out of wood and used to support the metal safe on top.
Yeah.
So the down part of the safe, he used to lock up the schmaltz, and they needed the schmaltz, they used to come to him to ask for
That's
schmaltz.
wonderful.
But he used to serve very well. They even made their own ice cream, which was something I never knew about, that people made ice cream at home. That was the first time.
How did you
found
feel?
out.
How did you feel being? How far away were you from Folkshan there?
Oh, it wasn't too far. Actually, over there it seemed far, but it was actually only about 4 hours by train.
Right.
But I don't think it was more than maybe about 100 or 120 miles from
How did you feel?
Folkshan.
How did you feel about being out on your own? How old were you then?
I must have been about 16 and a half years old. By the way, I have picked up quite a bit of knowledge about the jewelry business before that
Right.
by going to run my sister's store. because my brother-in-law was in the army,
Oh,
and he went with the army of occupation to Budapest.
right.
So she had a cousin of mine who was running the store there, but somehow or other the cousin never used to bring my sister any money home. So she said that she has to have somebody there, so I went to run the store for her. Well, the first day that I ran the store, I brought her home something like here, and not now, but before, would be $80. Well, $80, my God, when she saw that $80, she said, my goodness, she didn't see so much money all the time that he was there. So she said, well, let's celebrate. So she sent out for steak and karnatslag and all that, and we really celebrated. We had a bottle of wine.
So you were running the store when you were...
Yeah, so I was running, the store until my brother-in-law finally came back. He was discharged and he came back. And as soon as he came back, of course, he improved the business immediately. He stopped off in Bucharest or went to Bucharest, I don't remember, and he brought back some merchandise and all that, and he started doing business. He had the best location in that town there where I was running the store. It was a chain. And I had another cousin over there who learned the jewelry business from him, and he had a store over there too.
But how did you feel? I mean, you were awfully young to be doing that.
Yeah, well, over there we don't pay any attention about the age. Over there we know that, I'll tell you how you can tell how it was over there. It was very much the way things are here in Mexico.
Yeah.
You see those little boys there in Mexico running around and trying to sell jewelry and all that, and they even work in stores and all that. And many times you go in Mexico here and you have a little boy, 14, 15, wait on you and selling you. Well, that's how it was in Romania. And they go around barefoot over there, just like in Mexico. They used to go around barefoot like that. Only that in Mexico it's warmer, so it's not as bad. But over there it was real cold. Even the coldest days of winter they had to run. So if you want to have a good picture, that's how it was in Romania in those days. Well, I knew that I knew what. Hey, somebody comes in and wants to buy something, you just sell them. Or one case, a fellow came in one time with a watch that was just to give you an idea, that's where a little bit of business acumen comes in, or salesmanship. Fellow came in one time, wanted to have a watch repaired. And it was an International Universal watch. And that was one of the highest grade watches made, like Patek Philippe or Omega or Longines watches like that. Very expensive watch. And I knew that he got it from a German soldier that was probably killed. Mm-hmm. He was an ex-soldier. He comes in with a watch and wants to have it repaired, and what the heck did he care that it was the best watch or not? So I wanted that watch very badly, and I sort of hinted whether he wanted to sell it because I could make money on that watch. So he said no, he's not quite ready, but maybe he will. So when he said maybe, I thought to myself, well, maybe there's a good way of buying that watch. He came in to get the watch, and I just told him, say, you know that your watch, somebody must have walked in, they must have swiped it. So I said, I'll just have to pay you out for it. You want to sell it anyway, so it was bona fide, and I bought the watch. I paid them for it, and it was a very good buy, because heck, I would have to work about a week to make enough to what the watch was worth. Right? So you have to use your oomph, to do it. I was about 15 and a half years old. Right. Because you can imagine, I came here at 17 and a half, so, I was maybe 15, maybe 16. Well, anyway, after that, my brother-in-law came, and I was with my brother-in-law for a while. And my brother-in-law was he was a very handsome man, by the way, my brother-in-law. And also a very good salesman. And I learned quite a bit from him, certain things. Like, for instance, in those days, they started coming out with odd-shaped crystals for watches. You couldn't get even round crystals for watches, leave alone odd-shaped.
Right.
And he would cut a piece of glass, you know, from for a broken glass and broken crystal, and shape it and all that. And and then he started making lights. I don't know what you would call them, lights that would burn with benzene, and they'd give out a very strong light. They didn't have over there. We didn't have electric lights in that town where they used to have kerosene lights.
Yeah.
And it was the experiences were very good. I think that I'm almost willing to say that I wish to a lot of those experiences that Stephen could go through. It wouldn't hurt them, you know, naturally. But anyway, after that, I went back home because it seems to me that Father needed somebody over there. So they said, well, you better come back home because I got to have somebody here to help me.
Right.
Went back home, and that's while I was home working, why this fellow came along, and that's how I happened to go to Bucharest. When I went to Bucharest, this fellow, like I said, he told me he had no room for me. I went to live with my cousin there, and I went to work for this wholesaler. While I worked for this wholesaler, I saw some fellows, you know, some fellows used to come in from Vienna, and they used to come in with knapsacks, carrying jewelry in their knapsacks from Vienna, selling it to the wholesaler.
Right.
So I used to still see the fellow who brought me down from Fokshine, and that fellow could always use somebody in the store there. So he said, how about Herman, how about coming to work for me? I'll give you a good salary and all that. So I went to work for him. And he did pay me a better salary, and he even showed me where to go to eat. That's the time I started to eat treif, by the way.
Right. That was it.
Yeah, because there were no places, he said, there were no kosher places to eat. It was either a question of eating, bringing your lunch or making up your own lunch, or going to a restaurant and eating treif.
Right.
Well, I started eating treif. And, and I started... Then I started talking this fellow into the fact that he's wasting his time and he's losing a lot of money if he isn't going in the wholesale business. I said, look, you can go to the wholesale business. If you don't want those fellows to bring the merchandise down in their knapsack, if you don't, go to Vienna and buy the stuff yourself and bring it here, and you'll be in the wholesale business. Well, since I advised him to go into the wholesale business and gave him the idea and all that, he made me manager of the store. But that wasn't, he was, in a way, he was smart enough, because he said he's going to have a cousin of his that's very close to him. He's going to make her cashier, and I'll manage the store. Well, I managed the store, and I did pretty good business. But he got sore at me because I went ahead on the 1st of May, and I went demonstrating. So he said, no. He said, no, it's no good. He said, besides that, I'm in Dutch with Segalescu, who was the wholesaler that he took me away from, and he said, you better go back to Segalescu. He needs you, and all that. And after all, your dad does business with him and all that, and they're friends and whatnot, so don't... So I went back to Segalescu. Meanwhile, a cousin of mine who was also a jeweler came from Fultichan, that's the one that used to, didn't leave too much money for my sister, you know, so he came in there. So I took him in to board in the same place with me right away, and we went in business together to sell a little jewelry we could get from somebody. And
where were you doing? What do you mean? Did you have a store or a place?
No. If we knew friends or somebody, or repaired their watches or anything like that. and we did a little, but not much. You know, it was almost not worth it even to do anything to. But those other cousins that I had there, they were, well, you could call them racketeers, but they weren't actually. It was, they were actually good salesmen. It seems like the whole family are good salespeople. They used to, one of the cousins there that lived there, boarded there, I told you there was another cousin that boarded there from other side, used to take watches, buy watches that were made out of nickel or silver, and he'd take them out the case and send the case out to be gilded,
Right.
make it look like solid gold, and he'd go to the station, and when people would come in, he'd ask them, say, here's a nice watch. He wouldn't say it's gold or silver. No, he wouldn't say, here's a nice watch. So the fella would think that it's a gold watch and was stolen and all that, and he'd sell it. And he used to do all kinds of business. He made money hands over fist.
Yeah.
Then there was another fellow over there who used to work in a place selling clothing, and that fellow used to make a lot of money. And my cousin, you know, that we used to board, he used to like to play cards.
Yeah.
So we'd start playing cards. We used to start playing blackjack or 1431 or things like that.
Yeah.
And well, if he'd win our money, it was all right.
Yeah.
That cousin, then we didn't have any money, so he quit. I was a little bit